a hot pot isn't just food. It's a symbol of togetherness, of shared joy. But just pause for a second. Imagine, what if that fragrant white steam was hiding a horrifying secret? What if the pieces of meat you were picking up weren't beef or pork, but something born from an unforgivable crime, a crime against human nature itself? And what if that pot of togetherness was actually a hot pot from hell? Today, on the docket, we're going back to 2009, to the bustling city of Guangzhou. But we're not visiting the sparkling boulevards. We're slipping into an urban village, a place where the narrow, damp, maze-like alleys are home to working-class migrant laborers. It was in one of these alleys that a case unfolded, a case that would forever be etched into the history of China's most inhuman crimes. In today's case, we will comb through every dusty page of the human hot pot file. I won't just recount the events. I will explore the horrific details with you. We'll follow the journey of a little 4-year-old angel, from her bright morning smile to the moment she became an ingredient in a barbaric meal. We will paint a full portrait of a demon in human skin, a man with a history of mental illness who was forgotten by society, until his madness swallowed an innocent life whole. And finally, we will step into the courtroom, confront the fiery legal debates over the killer's sentence, and ask ourselves, what is true justice when faced with pure evil? This is not a story for the faint of heart. It will test your limits. If you're ready to face the raw, brutal truth, then let's begin. And don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to the docket, and turn on notifications. Your support is the biggest motivation for us to continue uncovering these mysteries. Now, take a deep breath, and let's step into that fateful alley. Our story begins on a cold winter morning. January 2nd, 2009, in a small alley on Chegang Street. Life was carrying on as usual. This place didn't have the glitz and glam of the city center. Just ordinary people struggling to make a living. And in the middle of this old, somewhat poor neighborhood, there was a little angel who brought life to the whole alley. Her name was Li Linli, and she was 4 years old. Linli was a beautiful, bright little girl with big, round, dark eyes that always sparkled with curiosity. She had soft hair that her grandma tied into 2 cute little pigtails, which bounced with every step she took. Her favorite toy was a worn-out cloth doll her mom had sent her, and she loved to hum the nursery rhymes she learned from TV. Her parents, like millions of others, had left their rural hometown for Guangzhou. Dreaming of a better life, they worked grueling 12-hour shifts in factories, 6 days a week, for a meager wage that was just enough to cover their living costs and send a little back home. The price of that dream was being away from their little girl, leaving her in the care of her elderly grandparents. Every phone call home, hearing their daughter ask, "When are mom and dad coming home?" was like a knife to their hearts. To the people in this small alley, Linli was more than just a child. She was a symbol of innocence, a joy to be around. Her clear laughter while playing hopscotch, her tiny figure chasing the neighborhood cat, it had all become a part of the alley's soul. Everyone loved her, spoiled her with candy and snacks. They called her the sweetheart of the neighborhood. That morning, like any other, her grandpa woke up early to make them a simple breakfast. He was over 60, not as healthy as he used to be, but his love for his granddaughter was endless. Around 8 a.m., after they finished eating, he remembered he had to run a quick errand. An old friend had asked him to help fix a broken electric fan nearby. He looked at his granddaughter playing with her doll, a little hesitant. Taking her with him would be a hassle, but leaving her alone felt wrong. His eyes landed on Auntie Jian's house right across the way. The door was open. Auntie Jian was also a migrant worker, a kind and honest middle-aged woman. He walked Linli over and said, "Auntie Jian, I have to pop over to a friend's place for a bit. I'll be back in an hour. Could you please watch my little Li for a while? She's a good girl. She'll just sit here and play." Auntie Jian, busy with a pile of fresh laundry, happily agreed. "Oh, don't you worry, Li. You go on. A sweet girl like this, I'll watch her. Just let her play here with me." The grandpa turned back, knelt, and stroked his granddaughter's hair, carefully telling her, "Linli, be a good girl and stay here with Auntie Jian. Okay, don't run off anywhere." Grandpa is just going to fix a fan and he'll be right back. Little Linli obediently nodded, wrapped her arms around his neck, and then waved goodbye. Her grandpa took one last look, saw her sitting safely in the neighbor's yard, and left with peace of mind. He could never have known that his decision to leave for just 1 hour would become his biggest, most agonizing regret, a scar he would carry for the rest of his life. 1 hour. Just long enough for the gates of hell to creak open. Exactly 1 hour later, around 9 am, Linli's grandfather returned. He walked quickly toward Auntie Jian's house, already picturing his granddaughter running out to give him a big hug. But when he got there, he only saw Auntie Jian struggling to hang the last of the clothes. The yard was empty. "Auntie Jian. I'm back. Where's little Li?" he called out, his voice still cheerful. Auntie Jian looked up, a bit flustered and guilty. "Oh, Li. You're back? I'm so sorry. I got busy cleaning inside and then came out to finish the laundry. I turned around and she was gone. She's probably just playing with the other kids around here. Try calling for her." A vague but chilling sense of unease started to creep into the old man's heart. This alley only had one way in and one way out. It wasn't a big place. He started calling his granddaughter's name, his voice trembling slightly. "Linli. Linli. Come back to Grandpa." His calls echoed through the small alley, bouncing off the old walls and back at him, but the only response was a terrifying silence. He started walking down the alley, looking into every home, asking everyone he saw. They all shook their heads. No one had seen her. The initial worry quickly morphed into real fear. Auntie Jian, now panicked, dropped what she was doing and joined him and other neighbors in the search. The calls of Linli were no longer just from her grandpa, but a worried chorus from the entire alley. They checked every nook and cranny behind bushes, under tables, in hidden corners, but there was absolutely no trace of her. In the midst of the chaos, someone remembered and suggested, "Hey, why don't we ask Miss Wang at the entrance of the alley? She's the neighborhood's living security camera. She knows if a fly so much as buzzes past." The group rushed over to Miss Wang, an elderly woman who had a habit of sitting and knitting in front of her small grocery store every morning, keeping an eye on her goods and the neighborhood gossip. Seeing the frantic crowd, she looked confused. "Miss Wang, did you see my little Linli run out of the alley?" the grandfather asked, out of breath, clutching the side of her chair to keep himself from collapsing. Miss Wang squinted her old, faded eyes, thought for a moment, and then shook her head firmly. "Not at all. I've been sitting here since before the sun was fully up, sold a few packs of noodles to the factory workers. I am 100% sure I didn't see the little girl run out. If she had, I would've seen her." Miss Wang's statement was like a hammer blow. It brought a tiny sliver of hope, but also sowed a much deeper terror. If Linli never left the alley, she had to still be somewhere inside. But that also meant she had vanished within a closed space. She was being held by someone. The culprit, the kidnapper, was one of them. A neighbor they greeted every single day. Around noon, Linli's grandmother returned from the market. Seeing the commotion and hearing that her granddaughter was missing, she almost collapsed. She didn't cry. She just stood there, frozen, her eyes staring blankly into space. Then suddenly, she let out a heart-wrenching scream, calling her granddaughter's name in despair. Pain and hopelessness overwhelmed the poor woman. At that point, the family knew this was no ordinary case of a lost child. They decided to call the police. Around 12 p.m., the Penyu District Police arrived. They quickly cordoned off the alley. Miss Wang's testimony was the key. The suspect had to be one of the residents. They began an urgent, house-by-house search and interrogation. And during that process, one name kept coming up, mentioned with hesitation and fear. A man living in apartment number 34. His full name was Huang Yongliang, born in 1979. But the neighbors just called him a Liang. Huang Yongliang didn't look like a monster on the outside. He was thin, with a plain, almost worn-out face. He had come to Guangzhou from Hazhou, a poor rural county, to work in a factory. But the picture his neighbors painted of him was deeply disturbing. He was an outcast. One neighbor recalled, he never talked to anyone. If you said hey, he'd just nod and keep walking. His eyes were always glued to the ground. Another added, he's got mental problems. His family back home knows, but they're too poor to get him proper treatment. Sometimes we'd hear him screaming and smashing things in his room in the middle of the night. A few months before the incident, Huang Yongliang's condition had gotten worse. He lost his job and barely ever left his room, living in absolute filth. He was like a ghost, a hidden presence right in the middle of the community, yet completely invisible. And then, a bone-chilling detail was recalled by one man, a few days prior. When the whole neighborhood was gathered around a TV at the end of the alley, a scene with a lavish feast came on. Suddenly, a Liang, who was always silent, turned to the group and said in a flat, emotionless voice, "You know, human flesh is actually pretty tasty." At the time, everyone just burst out laughing, thinking he was having another one of his crazy episodes, just talking nonsense. They joked back, "Oh yeah. How would you know? Did you try it?" He didn't say anything, just quietly walked away. Now, remembering that moment, their smiles were frozen on their faces. The police immediately went to apartment 34. The outer metal gate was locked tight. They knocked, calling out for a Liang, but there was no response from inside, a dead silence. Police returned several times that afternoon, but the result was always the same. You're watching the docket. The situation is getting more and more tense. A missing child. A disturbed, eccentric suspect locked in his room. His insane words from the past now sound like terrifying warnings. What do you think is hiding behind that silent door? Leave your theories in the comments below. And don't forget to like this video to support our work. Now, let's get back to the investigation. By around 4 p.m., the patience of the family and the police had run out. Linli's grandmother, in a fit of desperation, went back to a Liang's place with a few relatives and the police. This time, they didn't just knock, they decided to take decisive action. One of the men with them gave the metal gate a hard shove. Surprisingly, it wasn't locked as tight as they thought. It was just latched. As the gate creaked open just a crack, Huang Yongliang suddenly lunged from inside, using all his strength to push it shut, his face a mask of panic and madness. That action was a confession without words. The police and the others immediately charged forward, using their combined strength to force the gate open. Liang was thrown backward. He stood there, in the middle of the dark room, his face blank, his eyes dull, staring at the intruders. He didn't say a word. The moment the door was fully open, a horrific smell hit everyone, a mix of old garbage, damp mildew, waste, and a sickeningly sweet, metallic stench of blood and decaying flesh. A Liang's room was a disgusting mess, like a landfill. Dirty clothes were piled up, furniture was broken, and on the floor were dark reddish-brown stains that had already dried. A sharp-eyed officer noticed a doormat just inside the entrance was unusually wet. He bent down, lifted it, and touched the floor beneath. His hand came back coated in a thick red liquid. It was blood. Everyone's heart stopped. Linli's grandmother staggered and had to be held up by a neighbor. Someone with her whispered the grim reality in her ear. "Sister, I'm afraid your granddaughter. The odds are not good." The police immediately restrained Liang. He didn't resist at all, just stood stiff as a board, mumbling nonsensical phrases no one could understand. "Eat hot pot. Let's eat hot pot. It's delicious." The search of the hellish room began. It was tiny, maybe 100 square feet. Blood was spattered in several places, on the floor, on the walls. The eyes of a veteran police officer finally settled on a small, old, yellowish-white refrigerator. It looked ordinary, but in this context, it was the most suspicious object in the room. He signaled his partner, then slowly approached it. Placing his hand on the refrigerator door, an eerie silence fell over the room. All eyes were fixed on that fridge. When that refrigerator door opened, time seemed to freeze. The scene inside was the worst nightmare a human being could possibly imagine. This wasn't something you see in a horror movie. This was real. raw and brutal. Inside the cramped fridge, there wasn't food. There were the dismembered remains of a human body. And on the top shelf, placed neatly, as if on display, was the head of a small child. Her eyes were still wide open, but they were lifeless, empty, staring into nothing. It was Li Linli. A young female officer couldn't hold it in. She let out a piercing scream, ran outside, and threw up violently. Even the toughest men had to turn away, their faces pale with shock. The little girl's grandmother, who only caught a glimpse, fainted on the spot. But the nightmare wasn't over. Searching the makeshift kitchen area, police found a hot pot still on an electric stove. It was still warm. A trembling officer lifted the lid. A horrific, pungent smell billowed out. Inside the murky, red broth, floating among some small bone fragments, were thin slices of meat. Not only that, they found more bone fragments and scraps of flesh in the toilet and the trash can. Huang Yongliang, the killer, after a period of silence, finally confessed. His voice was flat, without a shred of emotion. He said he had lured little Linli into his room and killed her. Then, he dismembered her body. He put some parts in the fridge to save for later. Another portion, he sliced up, put into the hot pot, and ate. He had eaten the flesh of a 4-year-old child. The human hot pot case sent a shockwave across China. The biggest question everyone asked was, why? What motive could possibly drive a person to commit such a monstrous act? Forensic psychiatrists were brought in. Their evaluation concluded that Huang Yongliang suffered from paranoid schizophrenia. He lived in his own world, a world filled with delusions and paranoid thoughts, where the line between reality and fantasy had been completely erased. To him, killing a child was probably no different than killing a chicken or a duck for food. His brutality didn't come from hatred, but from a mind that had been completely ravaged by illness. And it was this diagnosis that turned Huang Yongliang's trial into a fiery legal battle between justice and medicine, between punishment and the reality of insanity. The atmosphere in the courtroom was incredibly tense. The prosecution, representing the voice of the victim's family and the outrage of society, made a powerful case. They detailed Liang's crime, emphasizing its cruelty and inhumanity. The defendant's actions have crossed every line of morality and law. This is not the act of a human, but of a monster. Even if the defendant is mentally ill, the sheer brutality of his crime cannot be forgiven. If we do not impose the highest penalty, how can we comfort the victim's soul? How can we soothe the family's pain? And how can we deter similar crimes? In contrast, Liang's defense attorney offered a different perspective, one based on medicine and law. Your Honor, my client, Huang Yongliang, at the time of the crime, was determined to have diminished capacity for criminal responsibility. He was not in full control of his actions. He did not understand the nature and consequences of what he was doing. Is it truly justice to punish someone who lacks the full capacity to understand their actions? This tragedy is not just the crime of one individual, but the failure of an entire system, a system that failed to care for, manage, and treat mentally ill patients like my client, allowing them to become ticking time bombs in our society. Finally, after days of deliberation, the Guangzhou Intermediate People's Court delivered a landmark verdict. The judge, in a firm voice, declared, the court acknowledges the forensic psychiatric evaluation regarding the defendant's diminished capacity. However, considering that the defendant Huang Yongliang's crime was exceptionally cruel, his methods particularly barbaric, the circumstances specially egregious, and the negative social impact extreme, the court, despite the mitigating factor, has decided against leniency and imposes the highest penalty, death. Huang Yongliang was later executed. The death sentence ended Huang Yongliang's life, but it couldn't end this tragic story. It couldn't bring little Linli back. It couldn't heal the deep wounds of her family, her neighbors, and the entire community. After the case, Linli's parents left Guangzhou, returning to their hometown completely broken. The pain of losing their child and the horrific images of her death will haunt them for the rest of their lives. Her grandfather and Auntie Jane, The last two adults to be with the little girl have lived with unimaginable guilt and regret. If only. Those two words will likely echo in their minds until their dying day. After the case, the Chagang Alley effect took hold. The once noisy alley, filled with the sounds of children, fell silent. Many terrified tenants moved away. Apartment number 34 was abandoned, its door sealed, becoming a symbol of a haunting memory, a place no one dared to approach after dark. This case isn't just a story about a mentally ill killer. It's a blaring alarm bell about a much bigger problem: the gaps in the management, supervision, and treatment of people with severe mental illness in the community, especially among the poor migrant population. Li Linli's tragedy might have been prevented if Huang Yongliang had received better care, supervision, and treatment. This is a responsibility that falls not just on the family, but on society as a whole. The hot pot on a lying stove has long gone cold, but its chilling memory will last forever. It's a reminder for us to always be vigilant, to pay attention to those around us, and to never dismiss unusual signs, no matter how small they may seem. Thank you for watching today's episode of The Docket. What do you think about the death penalty for a mentally ill person in a case like this? Is that true justice? And what does our society need to do to prevent similar tragedies? Share your thoughts and feelings in the comments below. Every comment is a vital part of this discussion. If you found this video meaningful, please hit the like button, share it, and don't forget to subscribe to The Docket to join us on our journey to explore other shocking cases. We'll see you in the next one.